Blaise Pascal, one of the most interesting Christian thinkers from history, on my view, once said that people despise Christianity. And therefore, our task is to make Christianity attractive. He says we must make good men wish that it was true. As is often the case with Blaise Pascal, you get these very profound truths in just a few sentences. Hey, if you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. It helps so much. Okay, so here's the quote. Men despise religion. They hate it and are afraid it may be true. The cure for this is first to show that religion is not contrary to reason, but worthy of reverence and respect. Next, make it attractive. Make good men wish it were true, and then show that it is. So there's so much in that quote. So many profound truths. Again, Pascal had a way to really pack it in. In fact, all we have from Pascal are just sort of these notes that he wrote as he was writing this much longer work in defense of Christianity. But he died. He died actually before he completed it. And so all we have are just sort of the notes that he made that he was going to develop into further thoughts. And this is one of those notes that comes in his Pensées. Now, I think his point to begin is to just say that people despise religion. And what he means by religion is obviously Christianity. And his point is just to say that, man, when we hate something, when we are against something, it very much colors how we will think of it and what we will believe. And that is so true of Christianity. So if somebody has been hurt, if somebody has been even perhaps abused in their life by a Christian or a church, of course that's going to color how they think of Christianity. It's hard to be dispassionate about something that you're really passionate about. So Pascal's point is that, right, of course people feel very strongly about Christianity. People feel very strongly about Christianity. And so that is the first obstacle one must get over if one is to persuade. And I just think as much as the critics of Christianity probably want to fancy themselves as just completely dispassionate and neutral, there's probably a lot more feelings that figure in than people typically realize. And of course, that's on the other side too for Christians. I mean, right, we might fancy ourselves as just these evidence seekers and, rational creatures just sort of going at the truth. But the reality is that those feelings that we have, both positive and negative, are figuring in quite a lot. We just don't arrive here as a blank slate. We come with desires, fears, wounds, loyalties, right? Moral commitments, even, I would say. Our reason just doesn't float free from these other very human attitudes and emotions. In another part of the Pensées, Pascal says it this way. He says that the heart has its reasons which reason does not know. The idea being that we're just complicated. There's a lot more going on than even we realize. Now, he says that people are afraid that it may be true. They fear it's true. And I don't know that he's necessarily talking about this secret fear that people have. So you think of the big critics of Christianity, somebody like a Richard Dawkins. I'm not sure that Dawkins in his quiet moments is like fearing that Christianity is true necessarily. I think the picture is rather that someone has a caricature of Christianity, right? Like a kind of false picture of what Christianity is all about. They might see God as a kind of vindictive bully or something like that. And they don't want that to be the case, of course. Like, who would want that to be the case? And so they kind of, in a way, fear that that is the case. I think that's more of what Pascal has in mind here when he says, they are afraid it may be true. And I think that's a lot of people. I think a lot of people have a skewed sort of view or vision of what Christianity amounts to. And so, of course, they don't want that to be the case. And in a way despise that, hate that. Okay, so what's the remedy? Well, Pascal in these short sentences gives us 3 steps. First is to show that it's not contrary to reason. I think what he's talking about is the plausibility. We're never going to believe something if we think it's just wildly implausible. I think that's all he's really saying here is first step is just to show that there's something going for it here. It's at least plausible. Many people that I have talked to through the years who used to think Christianity was just ridiculous, and then they began to look into it a little bit, and many, many people along the way have said that they were just really surprised how much evidence there is for Christianity, right? But it took them sort of looking into it, sort of taking it seriously, giving it just a little bit of respect, to give it a fair shake. And you begin to see that, yeah, there's some things going for it here. Again, you may not come to believe it, but you shouldn't say that it's completely contrary to reason. Next, we have to make it attractive. I don't think he's trying to say like it's not attractive and we got to try to dress it up or something like that. I think what Pascal would say is that, no, it's inherently attractive. It's inherently beautiful. We don't talk that way very often about the gospel, I think. We talk about the truth of the gospel. We talk about how good it is, but do we talk about the beauty of it, the attractiveness of it, the desirability of it? We need to make it attractive, to show its attractiveness such that good men, he says, which obviously just means people, such that good people wish it were true. Right, which I love that line. I just love that line. It's just a powerful line. These are good men, so there's a kind of, again, we've dispelled hopefully the hatred and the despising of it, and you're seeing the attractiveness, the beauty of it. The very natural reaction is to wish it were true. Like once you get this clear view of Christianity, then the natural reaction is to wish it were true. We can take the life of Jesus, for example. I think Jesus lived a beautiful life in very many ways, right? You can take the way he engaged people and loved people and cared for people and their needs. You could take his teaching. I mean, you can just kind of get lost in something like the Sermon on the Mount and just appreciate how profound, how countercultural it was. But ultimately, it's seeing his life, death, and resurrection as what we need in our alienation from God, our alienation from others and the world, right? That is what is breathtaking. That is what is beautiful. And when we have a clear view of that, that's what should make us wish it were true. J.R.R. Tolkien says it this way. He says, "The story begins and ends in joy. There is no tale ever told that men would rather find was true, and none which so many skeptical men have accepted as true on its own merits. To reject it leads either to sadness or to wrath." Now, there's a lot to that statement, too, and we could spend a lot of time on that quote for sure as well. This quote comes from an essay by Tolkien on fairy stories. Now, he doesn't mean by a fairy story something that's just false and fictitious. I mean, many fairy stories are false and fictitious, but he sees the Gospels as filled with these marvels and this beautiful and moving story. It's what he calls a eucatastrophe, a word that he coins, eucatastrophe. And it means kind of this goodness coming out of catastrophe, goodness coming out of badness. It's that happy and joyous ending that comes in the midst of tragedy and difficulty. That's what really characterizes a fairy story. Just think of how many movies, right, have that kind of fairy story ending. And his only point is just to say, that's the Gospels, right? But this story is going to be different than some particular hero story. You know, just think of some hero story in your favorite movie or something like that. those can be false and fictitious, and it's no big deal. But this one is like, if this is false, this is a big deal because it means that we're still alienated from God. It means that the world isn't filled with hope. The world isn't such that we live with purpose and meaning and so on, right? It should fill us with sadness, as he says, or even wrath. Okay, but then we come to this final step where we have to show that it's true. Thinking of Pascal here, I think he probably means something more like we live out the truth than just kind of like say, okay, now we've done all this work, now we can bring all of our evidence to bear on the issue. I think rather he's saying, in a way, live out its truth, or really kind of point someone to the reality of Christianity. They see that it explains them. They see that it explains the world, which again, that evidence has a role to play here. And I think this is, in a way, evidence and reason, but it's not so academic. I think that's the point, is that it's not so much just like reading arguments or formalized arguments. It's sort of seeing that this tracks with reality in a really clear way. And it makes sense, again, of us and the world as we find it. Okay, so that's it. So Pascal's saying that, right, people have a lot of feelings attached to their rejection of Christianity and their disbelief of Christianity. So what do we do about that? Well, what we have to do is, first of all, just get it minimally plausible, show that it's minimally plausible. And then we need to make it attractive, show how attractive it is, such that if we see it clearly, we should want it to be true. And then we've got to live it out. We've got to show that it tracks with reality and that it explains ourselves and it explains the world as we find it. So I think Pascal's a really good corrective to how a lot of people do apologetics today, where they seem to think that it's really only about the arguments and evidence. And I think, look, I love the arguments and the evidence. I spend a lot of time on arguments and evidence, of course, and it's been very meaningful in my life. But when someone is not ready for it, when they're not there yet, when they have lots of feelings, right? When they hate Christianity, they despise it. Well, you give them those arguments and that evidence, and they're just going to dismiss it, right? Hand wave it away. So his point is that we have to clear that up first. We have to clear up that obstacle so that people not only don't despise it, but they get this clear view, this glimpse of what Christianity is all about and its true nature and how attractive it is. And then they will wish it to be true. And in a way, then they're ready. Then they're ready to hear the evidence and the reasons and so on to see that it indeed tracks with reality. It speaks to who we are in the world as we find it.